I found the files in a cardboard box at the back of my ex-husband's closet on a Saturday morning in October. I was packing up the last of my belongings from our house in Denver, 7 months after the divorce was finalized. The box was labeled medical records in his precise handwriting, and curiosity made me open it. Inside were patient files, dozens of them, printed on official letterhead from Summit Oncology Center. My stomach dropped when I saw the names. These were not his patients. They were mine. I was a physical therapist who specialized in cancer rehabilitation, helping patients regain strength and mobility after surgeries and treatments. My ex-husband, Dr. Garrett Finch, was an oncologist at the same hospital. We had worked together for years, referring patients to each other and building what I thought was a partnership based on trust. But as I flipped through the files, I realized the truth. Garrett had been stealing my patient recovery data, publishing it under his own name in medical journals, and claiming credit for outcomes I had achieved. He had built his reputation on my work, and I had never known. My name is Zara Hollis, and I am 34 years old. I had been a licensed physical therapist for 10 years, working exclusively with cancer patients. It was demanding emotional work, but it was my calling. I helped people who were fighting for their lives, guiding them through painful recoveries and celebrating every small victory. I had developed specialized techniques for post-surgical rehabilitation, particularly for breast cancer and lymphedema patients. My methods were innovative, combining traditional physical therapy with holistic approaches like mindfulness and visualization. Patients loved me, and my success rates were exceptional. Garrett and I had met at Summit Oncology Center 11 years earlier. He was a rising star in oncology, charismatic and brilliant. I was drawn to his confidence and his passion for helping patients. We married after 2 years of dating, and for a while, it felt like we were building something beautiful together. But the cracks started showing 5 years into the marriage. Garrett became obsessed with his career, with publishing research and gaining recognition. He stopped coming home for dinner. He stopped asking about my day. I thought it was just stress. I never imagined he was using me. The files in the box told a story I had been too blind to see. There were case studies of patients I had worked with, their recovery timelines documented in meticulous detail. But the author listed on every publication was Dr. Garrett Finch. My name appeared nowhere, not in the acknowledgments, not in the citations, nowhere. He had taken my techniques, my data, and my results, and he had published them as his own research. I sat on the floor of that empty closet, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, and I felt something shift inside me. Not sadness, not even anger yet. Just a cold, clear understanding. Garrett had stolen from me. He had used my work to advance his career while I stayed in the shadows, uncredited and invisible. And he had done it so carefully, so deliberately, that I had never suspected. I took photos of every single page. Then I put the box back exactly where I found it, closed the closet door, and walked out of that house for the last time. I did not confront him. Not yet. I had learned something important from my years of helping patients recover. Healing takes time, patience, and strategy. So does revenge. I spent the next 2 weeks researching. I looked up every article Garrett had published in the past 5 years. There were 12 in total, all in respected medical journals. Each one cited patient recovery data, success rates, and innovative rehabilitation techniques. Techniques I had developed. I cross-referenced the patient names in the stolen files with my own records. Every single one was a match. Garrett had not just taken my ideas. He had systematically documented my work, repackaged it as his own research, and submitted it for publication. The recognition he had gained was staggering. He had been invited to speak at conferences, interviewed by medical magazines, and promoted to head of oncology at Summit. All of it built on a foundation of lies. I also discovered something else. Garrett was being considered for a prestigious award, the Keller Prize for Innovation in Oncology. It was one of the most respected honors in the field, worth $50,000 and guaranteed to elevate his career even further. The award ceremony was scheduled for March, 5 months away. I had 5 months to take everything from him, the way he had taken from me. And I knew exactly how to do it. I reached out to a lawyer named Tobias Klein. He specialized in intellectual property and medical malpractice. We met at his office downtown and I laid out everything I had. The stolen files, the published articles, the timeline of when I had developed each technique. Tobias reviewed the evidence carefully, his expression growing darker with every page. "This is textbook intellectual property theft," he said. "And it is compounded by fraud. He submitted your work as original research without attribution. That is a serious ethical violation. Can we sue him?" I asked. "Absolutely," Tobias said. "But lawsuits take time, sometimes years. If you want justice faster, there is another route." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You go to the medical journals directly. You provide them with proof that the research was falsified. They will retract the articles, investigate him, and destroy his credibility. It will be public, brutal, and permanent." I met his eyes. "How soon can we start?" Tobias smiled. "Immediately." We drafted letters to every journal that had published Garrett's articles. Each letter included copies of my original patient records, timestamp documentation, and expert testimony from colleagues who could verify my authorship. We also sent a letter to the Keller Prize Committee, informing them of the fraudulent research and requesting they rescind his nomination. While Tobias handled the legal side, I focused on something else. I had spent the past 10 years building relationships with patients, and many of them had stayed in touch with me even after their treatment ended. I reached out to a woman named Felicity Oakes, a breast cancer survivor I had worked with 3 years earlier. She had been one of my most challenging cases, facing complications from surgery that left her with severe lymphedema and limited mobility. I had spent months working with her, developing a customized rehabilitation plan that combined manual therapy, exercise, and compression techniques. Her recovery had been remarkable. She had regained full range of motion and returned to her career as a pianist. Garrett had published a case study about her recovery, claiming he had pioneered a new treatment protocol. He had not mentioned me once. When I explained the situation to Felicity, she was furious. "He did what she said," her voice shaking. "You saved my life, Zara. You are the reason I can play piano again." And he took credit for that. He nodded. "I need your help, Felicity. I need you to testify that I was the one who treated you, not Garrett." She did not hesitate. "I will do whatever it takes." Over the next month, I contacted 15 other patients whose cases Garrett had used in his research. All of them agreed to provide statements. Their stories were powerful and consistent. I was the one who had designed their rehabilitation plans, coached them through pain and setbacks, and celebrated their victories. Garrett had been their oncologist, prescribing treatments and monitoring their medical progress. But he had not been involved in their physical recovery. That was my work. Tobias compiled the statements into a comprehensive report. We now had patient testimony, medical records, and documented proof that Garrett had falsified research. It was an airtight case. In December, the first journal responded. The editor of the Journal of Clinical Oncology sent a formal letter stating they were launching an investigation into Garrett's published article. They requested additional documentation and informed us that the article would be temporarily removed from their database pending the outcome. One by one, the other journals followed. By January, all 12 of Garrett's published articles were under investigation. The medical community was beginning to take notice, and rumors started spreading. I stayed quiet, watching the dominoes fall. Garrett called me in late January. His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "What are you doing, Zara?" he demanded. "You are trying to destroy me." I stayed calm. "I am correcting the record, Garrett. You stole my work and claimed it as your own. I am making sure the truth comes out." He laughed bitterly. "The truth? You think anyone will believe you over me? I am a respected oncologist. You are just a physical therapist." "That is where you are wrong," I said. "I have documentation, patient testimony, and expert verification. Your reputation is built on lies, and it is about to collapse." He was silent for a moment. Then his voice turned cold. "If you go through with this, I will ruin you. I will make sure you never work in this field again." I smiled, even though he could not see it. "You already tried to ruin me, Garrett. You just did it quietly. Now it is my turn, and I am doing it loudly." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt a rush of power. I was no longer the invisible partner, the woman behind the curtain. I was the one holding the match, and I was about to burn everything down. In February, the first journal officially retracted Garrett's article. The retraction notice was published online, stating that the research contained falsified data and improperly attributed work. It named me, Zara Hollis, as the original developer of the rehabilitation techniques. The notice went viral in the medical community. Within days, the other journals followed suit. All 12 articles were retracted, each one citing fraud and intellectual property theft. Garrett's name became synonymous with academic dishonesty. The hospital launched its own investigation. Summit Oncology Center issued a statement saying they took ethical violations seriously and were reviewing the matter. Garrett was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. His colleagues, the same people who had celebrated his success, now avoided him. His patients requested transfers to other oncologists. His career, the one he had built on my stolen work, was disintegrating. The Keller Prize Committee sent a formal letter rescinding his nomination. They stated that the award was reserved for individuals who demonstrated the highest standards of integrity, and that Garrett no longer met that criteria. The letter was copied to every major oncology organization in the country. Garrett was finished. But I was not done. I wanted more than just professional ruin. I wanted public acknowledgement. In March, I was invited to speak at the National Physical Therapy Conference in San Francisco. The conference organizers had read about the scandal and wanted me to present my rehabilitation techniques, the ones Garrett had stolen. Accepted. The presentation was scheduled for the same week the Keller Prize ceremony would have taken place. I spent weeks preparing, compiling case studies, recovery data, and patient testimonials. I created a presentation that was clear, compelling, and undeniable. On the day of the conference, I stood in front of 500 physical therapists and medical professionals. I told them my story, not with bitterness, but with facts. I explained the techniques I had developed, the patients I had helped, and the theft I had endured. I showed them the evidence, the stolen files, the retracted articles, and the patient statements. Then I presented my original research, the work that Garrett had tried to claim. The room was silent when I finished. Then, slowly, people began to stand. One by one, the entire audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted over 3 minutes. After the conference, I was approached by a publisher. They wanted me to write a book about my rehabilitation techniques and my experience exposing the fraud. The book would be both a professional resource and a personal narrative. I agreed. Writing the book was cathartic. I poured everything into it, the science behind my methods, the stories of the patients I had helped, and the betrayal I had survived. I also included a chapter on recognizing and reporting professional misconduct. I wanted other people, especially women in male-dominated fields, to know they did not have to stay silent. The book, titled Stolen Recovery: How I Reclaimed My Work and My Voice, was published in September. It became a bestseller in the medical community, used as a textbook in physical therapy programs and recommended by professional organizations. Reviews praised it for being both educational and inspiring. One reviewer called it a manifesto for professional integrity. The recognition I received was overwhelming. I was invited to speak at universities, hospitals, and conferences. I was interviewed by medical journals and featured in articles about ethics in healthcare. My techniques were finally being credited to me, and my name was becoming known in the field. Garrett, meanwhile, had disappeared from public life. The hospital investigation concluded in August, finding him guilty of research misconduct and ethical violations. He was terminated from Summit Oncology Center, and his medical license was suspended pending review by the state medical board. The board held a hearing in October. I was invited to testify. I stood before the panel of doctors and administrators and told them everything. I presented the evidence, answered their questions, and watched as Garrett sat at the defense table, his face pale and defeated. The board deliberated for 2 days. Their decision was unanimous. Garrett's medical license was revoked. He was barred from practicing medicine in the state of Colorado. His career was over. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet sense of closure. He had tried to erase me, to build his success on my invisible labor. But I had made myself visible. I had reclaimed my work, my voice, and my identity. And in doing so, I had ensured he could never hurt anyone else. I used the attention from the book to launch something new. I founded a non-profit organization called the Acknowledgement Project, dedicated to protecting healthcare professionals from intellectual property theft and ensuring proper attribution in medical research. We provided legal resources, advocacy, and education to people who had been exploited. The response was immediate. Within the first month, we received over 200 inquiries from healthcare workers, researchers, and academics who had experienced similar theft. Their stories were heartbreaking and familiar. Junior researchers whose work was claimed by senior professors. Nurses whose patient care innovations were credited to doctors. Physical therapists like me whose techniques were stolen by physicians. We helped them document their cases, connect with lawyers, and file complaints with professional organizations. We also lobbied for stronger regulations around research attribution and intellectual property protections in healthcare. By the end of the first year, the Acknowledgement Project had helped recover credit for over 50 individuals. We had successfully challenged fraudulent research, secured retractions, and held institutions accountable. We were changing the culture one case at a time. In December, I received an invitation to the Keller Prize ceremony. The committee wanted to honor me with a special recognition award for my contributions to cancer rehabilitation and for exposing research fraud. I was hesitant at first. The Keller Prize was supposed to have been Garrett's moment of triumph. Now it was mine. But I accepted. The ceremony was held in Boston, a formal event attended by the leading figures in oncology. I wore a simple black dress and stood backstage, waiting for my name to be called. When the presenter introduced me, she spoke about my innovative techniques, my dedication to patients, and my courage in standing up for the truth. She called me a pioneer and a role model. I walked onto the stage, and the audience stood and applauded. I accepted the award, a crystal trophy engraved with my name, and stepped up to the microphone. I spoke about the importance of integrity in medicine, the need to protect and credit the work of all healthcare professionals, and the power of speaking up when something is wrong. This award is not just for me, I said. It is for every person whose work has been stolen, whose voice has been silenced, and whose contributions have been erased. We deserve to be seen. We deserve to be heard. And we will no longer be invisible. After the ceremony, I was approached by several oncologists who had worked with Garrett. They apologized for not seeing the truth sooner, for enabling his behavior, and for failing to question his sudden rise. Their apologies were sincere, but they also highlighted a larger problem. The medical field, like many professions, was built on hierarchies that rewarded visibility over substance. Doctors were credited for outcomes that involved entire teams of nurses, therapists, and technicians. Research was published under the names of senior investigators, while junior researchers did the work. It was a systemic issue, and Garrett was just one example. I started speaking about this publicly, using my platform to advocate for systemic change. I wrote op-eds for medical journals, arguing for mandatory co-authorship policies and transparent attribution standards. I testified before healthcare committees, pushing for regulations that protected all members of care teams. The conversation I started began to spread. Professional organizations updated their ethics guidelines. Journals implemented stricter verification processes for submitted research. Hospitals created policies requiring acknowledgement of all contributors to patient care innovations. It was not a complete fix, but it was progress. And it had started because I refused to stay silent. My personal life also began to heal. The divorce from Garrett had been brutal, leaving me emotionally exhausted and distrustful. But as I rebuilt my professional identity, I also rebuilt my sense of self. I went to therapy, processing the betrayal and the years I had spent feeling invisible. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the marriage. I started running again, something I had loved before Garrett and I got together. I also met someone new. His name was Callum West, and he was a trauma surgeon at a different hospital. We met at a medical ethics workshop where I was speaking. He approached me afterward, introduced himself, and told me my presentation had been eye-opening. We started talking and I realized he was different from Garrett. He listened. He asked questions. He valued my work. We started dating slowly, cautiously. I was not ready to rush into anything, and he respected that. He was patient, kind, and genuinely interested in who I was, not what I could do for him. 6 months later, we were in a serious relationship. He supported the Acknowledgement Project, attended my speaking events, and celebrated every victory with me. For the first time in years, I felt seen in a relationship. Not as a partner who provided something, but as an equal. In March, exactly 2 years after I had found the stolen files, I received a letter. It was from Garrett, handwritten on plain paper. The envelope had no return address. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. The letter was short. Zara, it began. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness, and I am not asking for it. I am writing to tell you that you were right. I stole your work, and I destroyed my career because of it. I told myself I was just organizing your data, that I was helping patients by publishing the research. But that was a lie. I was building my reputation on your labor, and I knew it. You stood up for yourself when I counted on you staying quiet. You exposed the truth and you won. I have lost everything, but I deserve to lose it. I hope you have found the recognition you always deserved. The letter was unsigned. I read it twice, then folded it and put it away. It was not the apology I had needed 2 years ago, but it was acknowledgement. Garrett finally admitted what he had done, even if only to me. I did not respond. There was nothing left to say. He was part of my past, a chapter that had closed. I was focused on the future. The Acknowledgement Project continued to grow. By our 2nd anniversary, we had a team of 12 staff members, including lawyers, advocates, and researchers. We had helped over 200 people reclaim credit for their work. We had successfully challenged fraudulent research at major institutions and secured policy changes at hospitals across the country. We also launched an online resource hub, providing free templates for documenting work, guides for reporting misconduct, and a database of ethical lawyers and advocates. The hub received over 10,000 visitors in its first month. One of the most rewarding aspects of the work was hearing from people whose lives had been changed. A nurse in Texas who had developed a wound care protocol that was stolen by a doctor. A respiratory therapist in Florida whose ventilator management techniques were claimed by a physician. A dietitian in Oregon whose nutrition plans were published without credit. Each of them had felt powerless, invisible, and defeated. And each of them found the courage to fight back because they saw me do it first. That was the real victory. Not Garrett's downfall, not the awards or recognition, but the ripple effect of one person standing up and inspiring others to do the same. I also returned to clinical work. I had taken time off to focus on the Acknowledgement Project and my advocacy work, but I missed working with patients. I missed the hands-on day-to-day work of helping people heal. I joined a private rehabilitation clinic in Denver that specialized in cancer recovery. It was smaller than Summit, but it was patient-focused and values-driven. I was given full autonomy over my practice, and I was credited for every technique I developed. The clinic also partnered with the Acknowledgement Project, implementing policies that ensured all therapists received proper recognition for their contributions. It became a model for ethical practice, and other clinics reached out asking for guidance on how to replicate our approach. Working with patients again reminded me why I had become a physical therapist in the first place. It was not about recognition or awards. It was about the moment when a patient took their first pain-free step, lifted their arm above their head, or cried with relief because they could finally do something they thought they had lost forever. Those moments were the heart of my work, and they always would be. In June, I was invited to give a keynote address at the American Physical Therapy Association's annual conference. The theme was Innovation and Integrity in Rehabilitation. I stood on the stage in front of thousands of therapists and told them my story one more time. But this time I focused on the future. We have an opportunity, I said, to redefine what success looks like in our profession. Success is not just about clinical outcomes or published research. It is about honesty, collaboration, and making sure every person who contributes to a patient's recovery is acknowledged. I urged them to document their work, to advocate for themselves, and to refuse to be invisible. I also challenged institutions to do better, to create systems that protected therapists and ensured proper attribution. The response was overwhelming. After the keynote, dozens of therapists approached me, sharing their own stories and asking for advice. Several universities invited me to teach workshops on professional ethics and intellectual property. Professional organizations asked me to serve on committees dedicated to reforming attribution standards. I was no longer just a therapist or an advocate. I had become a leader in a movement to change the profession. That summer, I received an email from a journalist named Octavia Ford. She was writing a long-form investigative piece about intellectual property theft in healthcare, and she wanted to feature my story. The article was published in The Atlantic in September. It was titled The Invisible Healers: How Healthcare Professionals Are Fighting for Recognition. The piece detailed my case, along with the stories of 5 other healthcare workers who had experienced similar theft. It explored the systemic issues that enabled the exploitation and highlighted the work being done to address them. The article went viral, shared widely on social media and discussed on national news programs. It sparked a broader conversation about power dynamics in healthcare, the undervaluation of allied health professionals, and the need for structural change. The attention was intense, but it also brought more people to the Acknowledgement Project. Our website traffic surged. We received inquiries from healthcare workers around the world. The movement was growing beyond anything I had imagined. And it all started because I refused to accept that my work did not matter. In October, I was contacted by a documentary filmmaker. She wanted to create a film about my journey, from discovering the stolen files to exposing Garrett to founding the Acknowledgement Project. The documentary would explore the broader issue of intellectual property theft in healthcare and feature interviews with other professionals who had been affected. I agreed, hoping it would reach an even wider audience. The film crew followed me for 6 months, documenting my work at the clinic, my advocacy efforts, and the impact of the Acknowledgement Project. They interviewed patients I had treated, lawyers who had helped me, and other healthcare workers who had fought similar battles. The documentary, titled Reclaimed, premiered at a film festival in April. It received critical acclaim and was picked up by a major streaming platform. Within weeks, it had been watched by millions of people. The response was overwhelming. Healthcare professionals from around the world reached out, sharing their stories and asking for help. The film sparked policy discussions at hospitals, universities, and professional organizations. It became required viewing in some medical and therapy schools, used as a teaching tool about ethics and professional responsibility. In June, I was invited to speak at the World Health Summit in Geneva. It was a prestigious international conference attended by healthcare leaders, policymakers, and advocates from over 100 countries. I was asked to present on the topic of equity and recognition in healthcare. Standing on that stage, addressing a global audience, I felt the full weight of how far I had come. 3 years earlier, I had been packing up a closet, discovering the evidence of my ex-husband's betrayal. Now I was speaking to the world about systemic change. I talked about the importance of valuing all healthcare workers, from doctors to nurses to therapists to technicians. I argued that patient care was a team effort and that recognition should reflect that reality. I presented data showing how proper attribution improved morale, reduced burnout, and led to better patient outcomes. I also shared the story of the Acknowledgement Project, the lives we had touched, and the changes we had achieved. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Afterward, health ministers and policy leaders approached me, asking for guidance on implementing attribution reforms in their own countries. The movement was becoming global. By the end of that year, the Acknowledgement Project had expanded internationally. We opened offices in London, Toronto, and Sydney, partnering with local organizations to support healthcare workers in those regions. We also launched a research initiative, studying the prevalence of intellectual property theft in healthcare and identifying best practices for prevention. Our first comprehensive report was published in a leading medical ethics journal. It found that nearly 40% of allied health professionals had experienced some form of uncredited work being used by others. The report made headlines and was cited by policymakers advocating for stronger protections. My personal life was also thriving. Callum and I got engaged in December, a quiet proposal during a weekend trip to the mountains. He understood my work, supported my mission, and never tried to take credit for my achievements. He was the partner I deserved, the one who saw me as an equal. As I looked back on the past 3 years, I realized that Garrett's betrayal had been the catalyst for the most meaningful work of my life. He had tried to erase me, but instead he had forced me to step into the light. And once I did, I refused to step back. It is 2028 now, and I am 37 years old. The Acknowledgement Project has helped over 500 healthcare professionals reclaim credit for their work. We have successfully challenged fraudulent research at dozens of institutions and influenced policy changes at hospitals and universities worldwide. My book is now in its 3rd edition, updated with new case studies and resources. My rehabilitation techniques are taught in physical therapy programs across the country, properly credited to me. I still work with patients, still celebrate their victories, and still find purpose in the day-to-day work of helping people heal. Garrett never returned to medicine. I heard through mutual colleagues that he left Colorado and now works in a completely unrelated field. I do not think about him often. He is no longer relevant to my story. My name is Zara Hollis, and I am not defined by what was stolen from me. I am defined by what I built in response. I turned betrayal into a movement, invisibility into recognition, and pain into purpose. I weaponized my rehabilitation skills not just to heal bodies, but to heal a broken system. And I am not done yet. Because as long as people's work is stolen, as long as contributions go unrecognized, there is healing to be done. And I will keep doing it, one case, one voice, one reclaimed identity at a time.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy watching Karma, Payback, come full circle every week, we dive into tales of betrayal and poetic justice. Don't miss the next one. Tap the subscribe button and join the Revenge Squad.